An SABC News presentation.
Good evening and welcome to Interface. My name is Rems Mabote. Today marks the start of 16 days of no violence against women and children. The global theme for this year is From Peace in the Home to Peace in the World. Tonight we talk to a survivor of domestic violence as well as a reformed abuser. But before we do that, let's watch this insight by Kinosi Queen.
The horrifying story of the man known as the Mudimole monster has captured the attention of South Africans as graphic details of how Johan Gotze tortured his ex-wife emerged in court this week. Ina Burnett stood bravely in court and told how Gotze mutilated her and then ordered 3 men to rape her. In the adjacent room, her 19-year-old son Conrad pleaded for his life before 3 shots rang out. Burnett and her son Conrad are among thousands of women and children who are subjected to horrific violence in South Africa, mainly perpetrated by men. Although she lived to tell her story, thousands of women and children have been scarred for life or killed. According to the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality, a woman is killed every 6 hours by an intimate partner in South Africa. And almost 800 children were murdered in the past 20 months. These figures have decreased slightly, but experts say it's no comfort for survivors. While they may overcome the physical scars, the emotional impact almost lasts forever.
That insight was compiled by Kinosi Queen. My guests tonight are Tumisani Ribombo from Sonke Gender Justice, and Angie Diallo, who needs, by the way, no introduction to television. She's a counselor and a survivor of domestic abuse. You may join this discussion. Comment on our Facebook page, Interface, on SABC3, or send a text message to 33726. Tumisani, I need to start with you because you've got a very amazing story to tell. At the age of 15, you were involved in gang rape.
Yes, thank you for having me on the show. I got involved because of peer pressure. I wanted to appease my friends who thought because I wasn't circumcised, I wasn't boy enough, also because I wasn't tendering for, the flock cows and that, I wasn't boy enough in the villages. So there was constant jeering every day, and a cousin and some of the guys from the football club said, look, if you want to belong to us, this is what we want to do. So I think a journey of the mind of raping in my context was just from peer pressure. But the guy who started the rape, because there were 3 of us, the guy who started the rape, I think his was more like an entitlement, or he needed to avenge himself, something like that, because it's like, this girl, how can she say she doesn't want to be a girlfriend of any of the boys in the village? For that reason, she must be raped, and a plan was sketched out. I was scared to be in the act, but I wanted to belong to this.
You wanted to become a man?
Yeah, so to speak, yeah.
And what were the consequences?
The consequences were that rape happened. Number one, I lived with guilt. But let me share something that was so astonishing and that added to my guilt was that when the ringleader shared this story after the act has taken place to the whole team, we received a standing ovation as if we have done something so good from the entire team, including the coach. So anyway, 30 years later, I lived my life as if this has never happened. I never thought about it. My guilt lasted only 3 years. After that, I just lived my life.
I want to come back to that later. Angie, let me get you in. At the age of 10, you observed, you lived with domestic violence, and and it actually changed your life because it got you to do what you do. What really happened at that time?
My father was a wonderful father. I was born of a father and mother that were very loving. My father was, I always describe him as a pea in a pod. When you open the pea pod, there's two sides to it. My father balanced that lifestyle so well. He was an excellent father, caring father, loving father, you know, who was doing everything for us. My father was this man who would buy pegs for the house, who put the tiles in, who painted the house, who loved us, who did everything of the best. And my father was an abuser, verbally, physically, emotionally. So as children, we grew up having to know that every Friday, I mean, from the age of awareness of being about 5 to 6 years old, we knew that on Friday, you must hide the eggs. You remember those days we used to cut wood with an axe. You must hide the eggs, the big knives that cut the chicken. You must hide them because that's what he's going to use to beat my mother, step her, and do all sorts of things to her. And I knew then that that was wrong. As much as I loved my father, as much as my father was my best friend, as much as I loved the home environment, I knew that that was not acceptable.
And how did you deal with it? What did you do?
At the age of 10, usually when he had beaten my mother, he would say, if the police come, because you remember during those times, if you went to a doctor or the clinic, they would call the police automatically. You know, you didn't have to report the case and the police would come. My father always called us and said, when the police get here, tell them that thugs came into the house. And that's the story we used to tell. But there was this one day, it was towards Christmas, and my mother's eye was almost coming out. It was gouged out. And she was so injured. And we were thinking she's going to die. And I decided that day that it's going to stop now. When the police walked in and they said, who beat your mother? I said, my father. And that was the beginning of having to deal with it.
At the age of 10?
At the age of 10.
Dumisani, you felt guilty. You said the guilt lasted 3 years. Did you ever get to meet this girl again in your life, the 30 years subsequent?
Yes. 30 years later, when I started working in the field of social sciences, I got to learn more about sexual violence, finding myself who I am and all that sorts of things. But also, I worked with women, unemployed women, and the stories they told about their boyfriends and men just made me go back to the time when I was 15, that, oh, you know, these men, I'm not different from them in terms of how I behaved and that. So I made a conscious decision to go look for the woman. I was scared to go to the house, but I went to the clinic and I had to tell my story there. So they called the girl, the woman. Now she was married. Yeah. She came to the clinic. We said, she thought I was a doctor or something, and I said to her, look, in fact, let me share this with you. I told my pastor first that this is what I want to go. And he said, oh, look, man, you don't have to do that. You were lost, you know, you were whiling in the mud. Now you're saved. You know, what if she goes to the authorities? I'm like, that would be justice for her. Anyway, against all that, I went and I found her and we spoke. And I just said to her, look, I'm very sorry about what happened when we were teenagers. I know it's wrong. And she just looked at me and started crying. And she said, 2 other men did what you did to me. I've never shared this with my husband or any other person ever since. My life has never been the same. Sometimes my husband is so happy, he wants to touch me, and I'll just cry because, and at the same time, I don't want to tell him why not.
Osenji, you see, for me, the story of Dumisani and the story of your dad is that he may have gone to do right, and you may have spoken and told on your father. But there are many other, your fathers, there are many other Dumisanis that never went to do right.
I believe that the do right, it's firstly for the person who's going through it. What I want to say specifically, it's 3 things. Maybe let me put it like this.
Before you do the 3 things, let's take a break. We come back, we deal with those issues. We come back after this right now. Welcome back. What causes abuse? And what goes on in the mind of the abuser? And could the abused be complicit? Comment on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC3, or send an SMS to 33726. On that note, let me read this Facebook message from Benson Zwani. He says, there is no excuse to commit a crime such as abuse. It is high time the perpetrators take full responsibility and seek help and gain redemption. But I need to ask this question, NG. What causes abuse? And I know it's too wide a question,
Yes.
but what makes young men in a football field to think that to become men, rather than go and attack snakes, they must go and rape a woman to
Let me
initiate?
start by saying to you, what is an abuser? In simple terms, an abuser is a person who does three things to you. He steals your joy. He eventually will kill you. He seeks to destroy you. And I'm stealing from a word from the Bible, John 10, verse 10. That says a thief comes to steal, to maim, and to kill. That's what an abuser does. An abuser starts by belittling you. An abuser makes you feel that you are not worth it. That's destroying your self-esteem. Then when he's done that to you, it's possible for an abuser to kill you. You understand? So a person who has been abused, most certainly, 70 to 20% from 20 to 70% of those people will become perpetrators of some form of violence because they've gone through it. I believe that every victim one day wants to be a perpetrator because they want to sit on the other side and justify what somebody did to them. So I also believe that, like this guy who just, whose message you read right now, is telling the truth. Dumisani had a choice to say, it does not matter that you think I'm not good enough. I'm not going to do it. I believe that for any person, you have a choice. You have a decision to make. You need to be strong enough as a person to know who you are. What is it that you want to portray as a self-centered person?
And then, Dumisani, the question would be, did you not know what you guys were doing is wrong? Because, you see, I don't understand how people could claim that there is no information enough to know that they're doing something wrong, that they're stealing somebody else's joy.
Mm-hmm.
I knew. In fact, to this day, I don't even know if I had an erection on the day. I had to be given dacha, and I had to drink beer and smoke dacha so I could go
to become a man
and perform the masculine act. So I think people know. I think it's a complex question. There isn't one just point that would go with. I think it's let alone a psychopath. But someone could feel they're entitled to have sex with this woman because I bought beers for her. I took her to Pretoria in my car, you're in my flat, so I'm entitled to that. And from that, people know it's wrong, but they will still commit the act. Others, like I said, it's about, I got to avenge, it's about, dominion and power. There's nothing you can do, I'm more powerful.
So therefore, is it something that we learn from some behavior? Is it a societal thing?
It does become a societal thing. It does become, that's why I started by saying it's what you, most times it's what you have experienced. What is it that we have seen? I've seen two things that come out of that. Looking only at my own personal family, two different people come out of a situation of that nature. It's either you decide that you are going to fight back with everything that you have, or you are going to do the same thing because you think it's the right thing to do. So I've seen that between ourselves in the family. My older brother and I decided we are never going to allow anybody to go through that. We'll help anybody we can. Our younger brother is different.
I like the word allow, and it leads to the question I want to ask, for which I suppose a few feminists may want to lynch me, but if they understand the context they want. Could victims of abuse be complicit in their own abuse? Subliminally, maybe not directly.
I don't even want to go into a technical word that we are using. I want to go into simplicity for the benefit of simple, everyday life of ordinary people who are the larger number of victims in these situations. I know that we want to put a context of understanding to it. The truth of the matter is that a whole lot of women are sitting in those kinds of situations because they are giving reason to it. We will be saying, because I don't work, because I don't have a house, because I have nowhere to run to. The bottom line is that you get involved with a person by choice. If you are in a relationship, you agreed to that relationship. Nobody put a gun to your head to say, I want you to be my girlfriend. I want you to come to my flat. You agreed to that. Whatever circumstances that happen to you then, when you don't like it, move away from it. Find help, and then your life can be different.
Is it easier said than done? Move away from it. Aren't other women sitting there because Dumisani is the only provider I can have? He's the father of my children. I'm not going to run away from this.
It's not. I also see it in this way that perhaps even before we get to abuse, let's just re-look into how gender roles are manufactured. Because when I raise my boy differently from the girl, I might not be knowing that this might open an opportunity for the boy to act differently in a masculine and dangerous way. So for me, we need to start there and work with the social structures along the way, that way. For instance, if I find a boy who thinks that it's okay not to respect the girl because I'm the man of the house, it might translate into violence later on. So let's deal with that when it starts at the beginning.
The men that you deal with in your organization, Tomisani, do they appreciate, one, that they're doing something wrong, and how difficult do they find it to get out of that loop, that web of abuse?
Well, Sonke Gender Justice Network implements 2 campaigns, the Brothers for Life and the One Man Can. And the men we find, they're different. Men are not the same. Others appreciate that. I know men who have changed their lives. Yes, do you go into their little closets and see that they don't do anything wrong? No, but what we see, I can attest to that. In fact, we are busy with a 3-year study just to ensure, to check that out, that can men change when we work with them. Some appreciate that. Some say, hey, I'm an African, I can wear an African hat, I can wear a religious hat.
And some blame the victim.
Oh, yeah, she provoked me. How dare she wear a miniskirt? How dare she smiled and, agreed to give me a hug, and she led me on. And we say no. When she said no, that was a no. You needed to stop there.
And the women you deal with, NG, do they know that no means no? Do they know that they can draw a line? Do you feel that they appreciate that they've got power, at least in saying the right things?
The women always know that no means no. There is no woman who confuses no with yes. Even with your own husband, when you don't feel like sex that night, you expect to say, I don't feel like it tonight, you expect him to understand. The same way as you agreed when your boyfriend and girlfriend were going to do it today. So it's still the same thing. The only challenge that I find is that because I deal with, most times now, I deal with families, I deal with husbands and wives, girlfriends and boyfriends. I find that the challenge with men is that they will always have something to relate it with. When you can have a relative to a situation, you are always saying, my father used to say, my brother, my uncle, every other man does this. What kind of a man do you want to be in your family? I think that's the question that we need to ask as women. What kind of a man are you willing to be to me? Because when you and I met, we agreed on certain terms. Do we have a common goal together that you want to work towards? Or are you going to be macho and want to please the outside world? And that's why, Mina, my interest as a person is based on this peaceful family. It's focusing on this family environment. And like he says, a child who grows up in a family where they see things, when those things change, when the parents are willing to change, then the change also goes to the children.
When we come back, I want us to talk about solutions, because I don't want us to sit here again next year and discuss this problem the same way. This discussion continues after this break. Welcome back. What tools do we need to end abuse of women and children? Are we winning in our campaigns? SMSs that I got on 33726. Mr. G says, what about women who abuse men for financial gain? Criminals are treated like angels in South Africa. That's Destroyer from Tula Mahash. And I had a little sympathy from community. So do you suffer in silence in order to maintain your dignity? I want us to talk about solutions, but before then, I'm going to read 2 things. We have a Facebook message from Nondumiso Shlachwa. She says, I know someone who's been abusing her children for years, and a few months ago I decided to go to the Social Development Department to report her. And they sent her a letter informing her she must come and report, and she came there, and when she got to the police station or to the department, everything disappeared. She lied to them, and they walked away from the matter. They did not report. They did not do anything about this person who's abusing her own children. Today, the City Press in its editorial writes, and it's very important that we should read this just quickly. They say, sorry, but this year they're not celebrating 16 days of activism. They say, we've been doing this for many years, but nothing is happening. It's just noise signaling nothing. At the end, it says, instead of dealing with the problem properly and fulsomely, we have consigned gender to just talk or to 16 days, and we're not going to celebrate it with anyone. Sorry. And that's my question about solutions. Is talk a solution? This is City Press says they feel this talk. Somebody goes to social development, nothing happens, so abuse continues.
There's 2 things to these 2 different questions. The first thing is that with social development, when you report, at the particular office where you have reported and there is no action taken, take the next step to the next office until we get to Batabile herself, because that's a minister who will do something about it, definitely.
But do people get to the minister?
That's, my brother, let's not say do people get to the minister. Let's say are people making the effort to get to the highest level ever? I think we need to stop putting excuses to say, I reported at the office next door to my house, I can't go to the next office. If nothing is being done by that particular employee, move to the next office. You have evidence. Get them to send a social worker to the house to go and view that family, to go and check out in that environment what actually is going on, because that's the step that's supposed to be taken. A social worker from the department is supposed to be sent to go and assess that family environment and then come up with evidence and then compare with the complainant.
And the social worker here did not do that.
Exactly. So that needs to be followed up. The women needn't get tired, because the abuse of children is abnormal. It brings up in a society where abuse is going to be continuous, and then we end up saying it's peer pressure. And those are the kinds of children that end up killing other children. So the second thing, I think it's unfair for a newspaper that has such integrity as the City Press to speak like this. Let us say in the past years, there was no Sonke Gender Justice. This is a change. Why aren't they rather saying we'll focus on these people that are a new organization that's actively doing something different, addressing men, and then we'll focus on that, because we're feeling that other organizations are not doing justice to the issue of 16 days of activism. And I'm saying that from just that point.
Hold that thought. Dumisani, this campaign has been going on for a number of years now. Are you seeing the pendulum swinging? Are you seeing change happening, opposed to the cynicism that one can associate with that which is written here?
I would say, yes, we do see change happening, yes. And this behavioral change, people want quick fix things, like how many babies were given food parcels. That's different. Here we're talking about people being challenged into their what they call private spaces, and they start changing. I think for me, this article is not direct to the issue, because we see this as a movement, and people are joining into the movement. Some people just stand up and talk now. Our campaigns are ongoing day in, day out.
And
so
I want you to tell me about
what
some of those campaigns very quickly, because I want us to use this opportunity. We're running out of time. What does Sonke do? What some of the organizations?
We mobilize communities. Go back to the issue which is discussing about somebody who went to a social work and didn't get any help. We're saying, how do we help to mobilize communities so that we can see cohesion, action together? So even if the social worker is not acting, I am, Angie's acting, that person will be acting. That's what we're trying to do. Advocacy at local level, provincial, nationally, policies that should ensure that perpetrators are, these things don't just happen like that. Let's talk to the individual boy, to the men in their spaces. Let's go get them in.
And do you reach out to the individual boys?
Oh, yes, we do.
How so? How do they reach you?
We go out to them. Some of us go to schools, some of us go to churches, some of us have community events, community dialogues where we target certain age groups of boys. Mixed groups, because sometimes that brings a fresher perspective of the discussion. So we go out there and ensure that, hey, let's talk to men not as problems, but challenge men when they're wrong, but talk to men as solution makers as well.
Also, Angie, the insert we played earlier said there seems to be a drop in the cases involving abuse. Are you feeling it in your work? Are you feeling that there's a change?
There's a change because the cases are being taken further. There's a change because people who were victims become survivors, who are strengthened, who are able to go to organizations that teach them the value of life, who ask them, who are you, where are you going, how are you going to get there? And we are practically helping women to get out of those situations. There are victim empowerment organizations out there that are assisting women to be able to be safe to go to court, get out of that situation, be able to access court orders. The lifestyle is changing. The only thing is that as change happens, it's challenged by what will be currently happening. Consistently, when you are changing anything, what then starts happening that looks similar to the change that is happening, it makes the change look like it's not happening. That's why today we can play an insert of that nature that shows that the man is there and he's been charged and he's in court and something is being done about it.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but somebody watching in here wants to know, how do they reach you?
I'm in Zone 9 Meadowlands. The organization is called Peu Entle HIV/AIDS Wellness and Youth Development, and the telephone number is 072-138-4566.
There's a lot of materials and education, www.genderjustice.org.za.
Thank you very much to our guests. That's it for tonight. Tembisa Magele is back on Interface next week. Thank you for indulging me for the past 10 weeks. Till next time, email us on interface3@sabc.co.za. Catch us on Facebook. My name is Rems Mabote, and from me and the team, good night and goodbye.